Kevin. Kevin. Breathe. Okay. Hey, Kevin, take your head up and breathe, okay? In and out. In through your nose and out through your mouth. Kevin, what room was it in? Was it in the living room? Was it in the kitchen? Or was it in the dining room? Was it in the living room? Was it in the bedroom? Where?
This was the exact moment Kevin Eastman realized that his chilling secret was going to be out.
That moment when Kevin can barely breathe. It's chilling. You can feel the weight of his secrets unraveling. Detectives are circling, and he knows it. This case isn't just about a murder, it's about jealousy spiraling into something monstrous. Scott Sessions, a vibrant musician, and Heather Frank, a mother caught in a toxic web, paid the ultimate price. Let's dive into how this tragedy began with a body found in flames, revealing a darkness no one saw coming.
On February 10th, 2020, a snowplow operator in Larimer County, Colorado, noticed a plume of smoke in the Pingree Park area, about a 2-hour drive from the town of Greeley. When he stopped to investigate and put out the fire, he was horrified to find a human body being consumed by the flames. The body was wrapped in plastic and positioned face down next to a log. Terrified, he immediately dialed 911 to inform the authorities of the horrifying discovery he'd just made.
I'm on the Pingree Park Road at the Monument Gulch exit, and I have a dead body.
Okay, we'll get help on the way. Are you able to provide any details?
Well, there was a tree on fire, and I went up to put it out, and he's laying next to it.
Okay, and do you believe he's beyond any help?
Yeah, he's definitely passed away.
After the detectives arrived at the scene, using fingerprint reading technology, they identified the victim as Scott Sessions, a 53-year-old trumpet player known for his infectious energy and love of music.
Scott Sessions was a trumpet player, and he was with us for about 6 years.
This guy's been voted Northern Colorado's best trumpet player, Mr. Scott Sessions.
At the crime scene, the detectives stumbled upon a sight so horrific that it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The gruesome state Scott's body was in sent chills down their spines. Scott's throat had been viciously slashed, nearly decapitating him. It had been cut so deeply with a knife that his spinal cord was severed. He'd almost been decapitated before his corpse was set on fire. It was evident that someone had a personal vendetta against Scott and wanted to make him go through horrors in his final moments.
There's no indication that this guy was camping. There's no other personal property.
To the homicide. They realized a missing persons report had already been filed by Scott's father on February the 11th, 2020. Scott had told his father he was heading out to meet a friend on Sunday, February the 8th, 2020. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. Scott never returned home. Scott was a talented musician, playing with the Movers and Shakers and George Gray's Elvis Experience Band. His life was filled with music, friends, and the joy of performing. Tragically, all that had come to a sad end. It was the members of his band who first noticed Scott was missing when Scott failed to show up for their scheduled gig on Monday night, February the 9th, 2020. This set off alarm bells for everyone who knew him. Scott would never miss a performance willingly. Music was his life.
We had a 3-night stand at a dinner theater. It was opening night.
My boyfriend and I bought tickets to go see George Gray and the Elvis Experience with my friend Scott Sessions, featured on the trumpet. I was super excited.
We were probably about 15 minutes to showtime, and we're all looking around saying, Scott's not here. So a lot of bandmates started texting and then calling, and he wasn't answering the calls or the texts. So the show went on without Scott.
I was like, hey, where's Scott? he never did come out on stage the whole night. And that is when I started wondering what was up. Scott wasn't one to miss a gig.
Scott's friends, George Gray, met with Scott's father, Stanley, and together they went to Scott's house to check on him. When they arrived, they found only his cat, Munchkin, who appeared to have not been fed for several days. There was no sign of Scott. Although the detectives had found him, it wasn't how his father had hoped. That was when Stanley learned the truth.
He had a concert at the, they had a concert, Candlelight Dinner Theater, Monday night. And Scott didn't show up. George called and he said, "Do you have any idea where he might be?" And I said, "No, that's the first I knew."
Scott's absence hit like a gut punch. A trumpet player who lit up every room, gone without a trace. His bandmates' worry, his father's dread. It's heartbreakingly honest. Imagine Stanley finding only Scott's cat, unfed, waiting. This wasn't just a crime, but a theft of joy from everyone who loved Scott. As detectives dug deeper, they found Heather, Scott's new girlfriend, and a shadow from her past, Kevin Eastman. How did a budding romance turn into a double murder? Let's find out.
The police made a significant breakthrough when they accessed Scott's Facebook account using a recovered password and stumbled upon the most defining twist in the case. They discovered that the last person he'd communicated with prior to his disappearance was a woman named Heather Frank, who was Scott's girlfriend. Cell tower data confirmed that Scott's phone had been in the vicinity of Heather's home on the evening of February the 8th, and it remained there until the morning of February 9th, when it went dead. Although the detectives had found a suspect, the most crucial piece of evidence, Scott's phone, was never recovered. Going through the thread of messages exchanged between Heather and Scott, they learned that on the 8th, the day Scott disappeared, Heather had reached out to him via Facebook Messenger at around 5 p.m. with a brief but inviting message asking if he wanted to come over. Excited to see her, Scott responded eagerly and told her that he'd take a shower and head over as soon as possible. Heather told him to hurry and bring some beer. A little while later, he messaged her again to say he'd picked up the beer and was on his way. What seemed like a casual evening between two people most likely took a dark and sinister turn right from the moment Scott arrived at Heather's place. Investigators interviewed Scott's bandmates once again to learn more about Heather. She was a 48-year-old mother of 3 adult sons and had been dating Scott for a very short time. She had met him merely 18 days before that fateful night of February the 8th, 2020. Detectives learned that Heather had attended a blues concert in January 2020, where she had a chance encounter with Scott. She found herself instantly captivated by the charismatic musician, and the two quickly felt a connection. Both shared a creative and artistic sensibility, which only deepened their bond. They began spending time together, going on a few dates that felt full of promise and excitement. To those who observed their budding relationship, it appeared to be the start of a whirlwind romance, marked by mutual admiration and a shared passion for creativity. With the evidence they had till this point, the detectives were sure that Heather was somehow involved in Scott's murder, but they were not so sure about how exactly she was involved. They decided to keep an eye on her and track all of her movements, hoping that Heather herself would lead them to stronger evidence. While secretly investigating Heather, detectives learned about her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Kevin. Reviewing the vehicle tracking data that morning, they discovered that Kevin's car had been on the move overnight. He traveled extensively throughout some isolated parts of the city, making several stops. One of these stops was at a remote ranch property owned by a man named Troy Bonnell, who had also occasionally employed Kevin in the past. Lieutenant Donnie Robbins of the Larimer County Sheriff's Department quickly took action. He drove out to the property in an unmarked car to avoid suspicion and observed Kevin from a distance. Kevin was seen tending a fire on Troy's property. The detectives' priorities changed when they noticed that Heather was nowhere around. When Kevin left and drove to a nearby gas station in Kersey, Lieutenant Robbins followed him. At the gas station, Kevin began filling a portable fuel canister. Fearing that Kevin might use the fuel to destroy more evidence, Lieutenant Robbins decided to act immediately. He arrested him on the spot and took him in for an interrogation about Scott's murder. After securing a search warrant for Troy Bunnell's property, the police began an extensive search, hoping to find evidence that Kevin might have left behind, as well as any clues regarding Heather's whereabouts. However, detectives were shocked but also a little relieved when they didn't find Heather in the containment structure where Kevin had been burning various items. And so the question remained, where was Heather? Was she even alive? Surveillance footage showed Heather leaving her apartment, with Kevin following closely behind, around 5:30 p.m. on February 15, 2020. This would be the last time she would ever be seen alive. Rita diligently worked to gather information, conducting interviews with those who were closest to Heather. Her goal was to reconstruct the events and circumstances that might explain Heather's sudden disappearance. As part of her thorough investigation, Rita spoke with each of Heather's 3 sons, seeking to understand their perspectives and any details they might provide. She paid particular attention to Alexander McLaughlin, Heather's firstborn. Through these interviews, Rita aimed to piece together a clearer picture of Heather's life and relationships, hoping to find clues that could lead to her whereabouts.
Tell me about your mom and Kevin's relationship.
Wild, I guess I would say. Like, in the beginning, when they first met, he's an alcoholic. My mom is pretty much an alcoholic too. They would get into a lot of fights. The first incident of him ever hurting her, he broke her wrist and tried to slit her throat. She told me it was a bar fight, but this was back in 2014, so 5-6 years ago.
And when you say he tried to slice her throat, how do you know that?
Because her throat had a scar, or not a scar, it was scabbed over, like he tried to cut her throat with a dull knife.
Rita also met with Heather's mother, Mary Frank. Although Alex had already provided Rita with detailed information about Heather and Kevin's relationship, Mary confirmed the details and additionally told Rita about the emotional chaos between the troubled couple.
It's like vinegar and oil. I know Kevin cares deeply for her. I'm not quite sure on what she really feels for him. I think at times, yes, she is deeply committed to him, and other times, not so much. My daughter's complicated. There has to be a child in every family, I guess. And she's my problem child. Has been since high school. Mm-hmm. And she just keeps repeating the same routine over and over and over. They're both alcoholics.
Okay.
They are. Now, Heather can control it. She can. For a period of time.
Can he control it?
Yes. Yes. I've seen him do it, and I've seen them both drunker than skunks.
Hearing Heather's son describe her injuries, her slashed throat, broken wrist, it's gut-wrenching. Kevin's violence wasn't new. It was a pattern. Heather was trapped in a cycle of abuse, yet she found hope with Scott. But Kevin couldn't let her go. His jealousy turned deadly, not just for Scott, but for Heather, too. How does someone's rage destroy so many lives? As detectives tracked Kevin's every move, they uncovered another horror. Heather's body, hidden and burned. This case just keeps getting darker.
At the same time, detectives were also questioning Troy Bunnell about what transpired on his property on the night of February the 15th, trying to piece together the events that led to the tragedy. Troy informed the police that Kevin had been scheduled to come over a few days earlier for some work, but hadn't shown up, which made his unexpected arrival that evening surprising. When Kevin did arrive, he offered excuses for his absence and began unloading tools into Troy's garage. Kevin's behavior appeared normal and cheerful, which led Troy to believe that there was nothing unusual about the visit. But Troy did not supervise Kevin's activities outside. Instead, he went back inside to spend time with his girlfriend, who was visiting him that evening. While Troy was being questioned by the police, He maintained that he'd not seen Heather at his property at any point. However, that didn't stop the detectives from inspecting every corner of Troy's property, which soon led them to another horrifying discovery. They stumbled upon what they dreaded the most: Heather's charred body. The body was discovered concealed beneath a large piece of wood. Her remains had been wrapped in plastic and wire. She had 2 wounds on her chest. Detectives confirmed that Heather had been shot twice in the chest at close range with a small caliber firearm. When the detectives broke this news to Troy, he appeared clueless about the whole situation.
So here's the thing. I get information. I know it feels like I've been stalling for time here, and I have a little bit. Because sometimes I get information that I'm not allowed to share, and I gotta wait until they let me share it. Okay. So when they were doing the search warrant at your property, they did find a body.
What?
Yes, sir. And
where?
I'm not sure. Obviously, I wasn't there. I've been here with you, but they that they found a body out on your property. They believe it's a female, so obviously you know what we're thinking. That it's Heather, so that's like.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell me that?
Well, I only heard about 2 breaks ago, and then I had to get my boss to authorize me to tell you. Because So that's just, you've been so patient with us, and I want to just explain to you why this is extending, right?
Yeah, but I got nothing to do with this shit. Okay. I mean, I'm in I'm just man.
I could see if I was in your position, I'd be pissed too.
I don't deserve this.
I'm sure.
And the heavy weight of a still unsolved mystery. The officers, frustrated by their inability to extract more information from Kevin, eventually decided to leave him alone in the interrogation room. And what happened next was truly concerning for the detectives. As Kevin sat alone in the interrogation room, detectives caught him in some extremely strange moments. Saying prayers and singing songs, Kevin seemed disoriented as he reflected upon the dire situation he was in.
Please let it be alive, not a body in the burn pile. Please. See the moon sees someone I wish I could see. Frère Jacques, frère Marjon, frère Marjon. Give me back the clicker.
Meanwhile, the police conducted a thorough search of Heather's apartment, uncovering what appeared to be blood splatter in various locations. They found a particularly large stain under the front doormat, suggesting this was the spot where Scott was ambushed upon entering the apartment. There was so much blood that it had soaked through to the wood floor below. Detectives believed that he was struck on the head before having his throat barbarically slashed. The presence of defense wounds on Scott's hands indicated that he'd made a desperate attempt to defend himself during the attack. Even after hours of interrogation, Kevin Eastman, the only person who seemed to know the complete story, remained uncooperative, strange, and silent.
Kevin's prayers and songs in that interrogation room? It's unsettling, almost surreal. Is he remorseful or just lost in his own lies? The blood in Heather's apartment screams truth. Scott fought for his life there. Kevin's silence can't hide the evidence piling against him. Driven by rage, he didn't just kill Scott, he erased Heather too. The detective's guilt for not saving her in time is palpable. Let's see how justice unfolds in the courtroom,
where the prosecutor framed the case as fundamentally centered on issues of power, control, coercion, and revenge, ultimately describing it as a case of domestic violence.
Unfortunately, what you're going to hear is that Heather Frank was in an on-again, off-again domestic violence
relationship with the defendant, Kevin Eastman. And that had occurred over a period of 5 years. And like domestic violence relationships, that cycle, you're going to hear that there were breakups and there were makeups.
During the trial, his defense team persistently advanced the same narrative that Kevin had presented during the investigation. However, despite their efforts, the jury was not persuaded by Kevin's version of events. The prosecution, on the other hand, presented a compelling counter-narrative and said that Kevin Eastman had not wanted to lose Heather Frank. They argued that Scott and Heather were still in the early stages of becoming acquainted and that Heather had no discernible motive to commit such a violent crime. Instead, the prosecution asserted that Kevin, driven by jealousy, was responsible for murdering Scott. They claimed that Kevin then forcibly involved Heather in the grim task of disposing of Scott's body. This portrayal of events painted Kevin as a central figure in the crime, seeking to manipulate and control Heather to cover up his actions. And to bring Kevin's violent and abusive nature to light once again, they brought Heather's sons to the stand.
How would you describe the nature of the relationship between your mother and the defendant while they were together before the breakup in December of 2019?
I would say toxic.
I want to take you back. Can you tell the jury about the first time you knew the defendant had physically harmed your mother? Do you remember about the time frame that was?
Yes. It was in February of 2014. I'm not sure the exact date that it took place.
Can you describe for the jury, first of all, what injuries that you saw on your mother?
When I seen her, she had a slash in her throat, like a knife, like a cut in her throat. I believe it was her right side of her face was really beaten up, like really bad. It was black and blue. Her wrist had been broken, and it was in I don't know what you call it, one of those.
Like a sling?
Sling, yes.
You also knew of your mom's relationship with Mr. Eastman.
Yes.
And you knew that relationship was rocky.
Very, yes.
You knew that there were times when the two of them would split up.
Judge, I'm going to object as to leading.
I'll rephrase it, Judge. Did you know if there were times where the two would split up and separate?
Yes.
Was there numerous times that they would separate?
Yes, ma'am.
The prosecutors alleged Kevin also killed Heather because she was an eyewitness to the crime. He was planning to burn her body too, but the police captured him before he could do that. On July 20th, 2022, a jury found the 50-year-old Kevin Eastman guilty on all charges.
So dispensing with the caption as it relates to count number 1, murder in the first degree involving victim Stanley Scott Sessions. The verdict reads, we the jury find the defendant Kevin Dean Eastman guilty of murder in the first degree after deliberation. As it relates to count number 2, murder in the first degree involving victim Heather Frank. The verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant Kevin Dean Eastman guilty of murder in the first degree after deliberation. The jury further found that this was an act of domestic violence.
Kevin Eastman received a sentence of 2 consecutive life terms without parole, along with an additional 27 years to be served in the Fremont Correctional Facility in Colorado. Despite the gravity of the sentencing, Kevin opted not to make any statement during the hearing. In contrast, the courtroom saw a significant expression of emotions from the victim's family members and friends. Among those who spoke out was Stanley Sessions, Scott's father, who addressed the court to share his thoughts and feelings about the case.
I just wanted to fill in a few blanks, and I wanted Mr. Eastman to know the consequences of his actions, that he can maybe roll around in his head. Maybe he can figure out a way to become a better person. I've lived 82 years. I think I have some experience. When he took Scott's life, he started a chain reaction that I'm sure he doesn't know anything about. Scott's mother was lying in a nursing home in North Glen, expected to live not very long. And you can imagine, and I don't mean to be selfish, I just as an illustration, you can imagine what it was like for me to have to go tell her on her deathbed that her son had been murdered. Her response was, who would kill my Scotty? She never mentioned another word. She lived 2 more months and passed away. He deprived her of telling him goodbye, and he telling her goodbye.
The case of Scott Sessions and Heather Frank was tragic, driven by jealousy and anger, which left many grieving. And although Kevin's conviction did bring some measure of justice, it could not undo the pain and suffering experienced by the victims and their loved ones. Scott Sessions, whose life was cut short in such a gruesome manner, would be remembered for his potential and the promise he held. Heather Frank, whose own tragic fate got intertwined with Scott's, was a beloved mother whose loss has left a deep void in the lives of her 3 sons. The testimony and statements from Heather's sons, along with the emotional responses from family members.
Stanley's words about Scott's mother dying without saying goodbye, they break you. This case isn't just about Kevin's crimes, it's about the families that have been shattered, Scott's music, Heather's love for her sons, stolen. Justice came, but it can't heal these wounds. What drove Kevin to such brutality? Was Heather forced into Scott's murder, or was she a victim all along? Share your thoughts below. This tragedy reminds us, behind every headline are human stories, forever changed.